When developing an assessment, wouldn't it be interesting to know right from the start how many questions or assignments you need on each learning objective, and what type of questions or tasks there need to be? With an assessment matrix, you ensure that all the selected learning objectives are covered in your assessment in a suitable way. This helps to ensure that your assessment will be both valid and reliable. Whereas making an assessment matrix may feel like additional work, using it will actually save you time, as you will develop questions and assignments that exactly match your learning objectives, and you avoid the risk of formulating too many questions or tasks that are aimed at the same content or skill. This video will help you to make an assessment matrix for your own assessment. So, where do you start when developing an assessment matrix? First, you need to take a look back upon your assessment plan. If you don't have one yet, and you're not sure how to make one, watch our instructional video about how to write an assessment plan. In an assessment plan, fundamental decisions are made on how the learning objectives of a course will be assessed. An assessment matrix, on the other hand, focuses on the more detailed design of each assessment separately. Start by looking at your assessment plan, select the assessment you want to design with the matrix, and note which learning objectives should be covered. As an example, let's consider a course on the topic of global warming, for which the assessment plan shows that there will be a written exam assessing 2 learning objectives. First, students need to be able to describe aspects that have an influence on global warming, and secondly, students need to be able to investigate strategies to reduce global warming. This means that both cognitive domains need to be represented in the assessment. Now, let's fill in an assessment matrix for this assessment. Here you see an example of an empty assessment matrix. The first row shows the different levels of learning following Bloom's taxonomy, from remembering to creating. The first column shows the learning objectives that the assessment assesses. As a first step, we need to outline the foundations of the assessment. Start by listing your own learning objectives in the first column. You can continue by marking at which level each objective is aimed. In your assessment plan, you've already decided how important each learning objective is in your course. You will need to copy these percentages to the final column in order to clarify the total weight of the questions or tasks in the assessment that will be related to a specific learning objective. At this point, however, you might want to translate the percentages into points that can be earned. For example, one learning objective counts for 20% of the final result, therefore they can earn 20 points for this objective in the assessment. The other objective only 10%, where 10 points can be earned. If you prefer to stick to percentages, that is also possible, but especially for written exams, it is often useful to make the transfer to points. Additionally, it's usually best if learning objectives are aimed at a single level of cognition, and in that case, you can now list the full weight in the appropriate cell, as well as in the final column. However, if you have objectives that are aimed at multiple levels, now is the time to decide how to split the weight of the objective across the targeted levels. Now we have outlined what needs to be assessed, at what level and what weight is assigned to each element, we need different approaches for completing the assessment matrix for different methods of assessment. We will first show how to complete the assessment matrix for written exams, and then show you how to complete it for assignments. For written exams, the next step is to add the number of questions and the points to be earned per question. This is illustrated with an already filled-in assessment matrix. The number of points for each learning objective are summed up on the right of the matrix. In the middle of the table, you can see that there are points written down for each cognitive domain, and in the bottom row of the matrix, all these points are summed up. For some assessments, the questions or assignments can be aimed at both the evaluating and creating domains. In this case, it can be convenient to merge these columns into one. The same goes for analyzing. When this domain overlaps with evaluating and creating, you can even combine the 3 columns into one column. As a final step, if appropriate, you can specify what type of questions will be used. You can write this down in respective cells in the assessment matrix. For example, 20 points can be earned with multiple choice questions, or 20 points with open-ended questions. For assignments, the assessment matrix is completed in a different way. The validity of an assignment is influenced by the alignment between the learning objectives and the grading criteria. To ensure validity, it is important that all the learning objectives are represented by grading criteria. For reliability, it is important that the same is true the other way around, that all the criteria on which student work is graded is linked to a learning objective. Therefore, instead of specifying numbers and types of questions, you will need to add a separate assignment matrix in which you show the relationship between the learning objectives and the grading criteria. First, think about the general ideas of the assignment. Is it a holistic assignment, or will it consist of a sub-assignments or tasks? For example, if the assignment is to advise on a certain policy for local government, one part of the assignment could be a written report, and another could be a presentation. If you have a general idea of the assignment in mind, you can continue with the matrix. List these criteria in the appropriate cells. If your assignment can be divided into sub-assignments or tasks, they can be reflected in the rest of the columns. Now, start formulating the grading criteria you will use to judge students' mastery of each learning objective based on their product or performance. List these criteria in the appropriate cells. If relevant, you can specify which criteria will be used to assess each sub-assignment or task. When you have completed the assessment matrix in one of the two ways we have described, you have created a clear framework for your assessment. You now know exactly what questions or tasks you need to develop. If you want, you can make a separate matrix for each assessment in your course, or combine multiple methods of assessment into one matrix. This will help to ensure that the questions or assignments used in the assessments are more or less equal to each other. Now, it's your turn to create your own assessment matrix. In the activity about the assessment matrix in this model, you can practice this further. Good luck!